Welcome everyone to today's Title Topics webinar. These are ALTA's free presentations we've been offering every month on it to discuss important topics impacting title professionals. I'm Jeremy Yowie, ALTA's Director of Communications, and today we will be talking about pillar number 3 of ALTA's best practices, which addresses protecting non-public personal information. And specifically, we're going to be digging into email encryption and helping you understand the different delivery options that are available. We had almost 800 people register for today's presentation, and we've got over 400 who've already logged on, so obviously this is an important topic for everyone out there. Before starting, I just need to touch on a few housekeeping items. A copy of today's presentation was emailed earlier today to all registrants. If you didn't get it, please send me an email at jyowie@alta.org. Again, that's jyowie@alta.org, and I will send you a copy after the webinar. All participant lines are muted for today's presentation. If at any time you have a question, please use the chat box function, as we'll hold some time for Q&A at the end. And as an added benefit, today's presentation is being recorded. After we've done the processing, the recording will be available on ALTA's website at alta.org/title topics. I need to thank SoftPro for once again sponsoring our webinars. This support allows us to continue providing these educational opportunities free of charge. With that out of the way, let me introduce today's speakers. Joining us, we have Scott Fairbanks of GreenFolders. Scott is a business development manager for GreenFolders, which offers an office management system to help companies go paperless. We also have Greg McDonald, CEO and founder of Cloudstar. Greg has worked with the industry for more than a decade and launched Cloudstar in 2009 to offer best practice consulting and IT solutions to title professionals. Guys, thanks for joining us today and helping us demystify this world of encryption. And hopefully at the end of today's presentation, people will feel a little more comfortable in selecting a solution. Scott, with that, I will turn the presentation over to you.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate the introduction, and thank you to all those who have joined. I know you have busy schedules, and we sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I think the information that we'll be presenting today, you'll find it to be very beneficial and helpful. As Jeremy mentioned, the title today is Tackling the Challenge of Email Encryption, and our goal is to take the challenge portion out of that and make this a much easier, more simple process for you. Before we get into the how, I want to go ahead and kind of set a foundation for us to build off of. So if we look at the reason why we're getting so much pressure for encrypted email or secure email, it dates back to essentially the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act and other state and federal regulation that has then encouraged the ALTA, the American Land Title Association, to create these best practices. Now, off record, I think they've just done a fantastic job of putting this material and these webinars and things together. Obviously, best practice number 3 we found to be one of the more challenging pillars to be compliant with. And this focuses on ensuring that data that contains NPI is being handled in a safe and a secure fashion, whether that be data at rest, data in use, and what we're talking about today, data in transit or data in motion. Okay? So by definition, we're to adopt and maintain a written privacy and information security program to protect this non-public personal information. Okay? So if we go to the next slide, what I want to do is actually give just kind of a brief history. I mentioned this a little earlier. This all started, well, I shouldn't say it all started, but if you look back, it really starts to get traction in 1999 with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, right? Where federal regulation comes out stating institutions dealing with financial information need to make sure that they're handling that in a safe and secure fashion. Right? And then we get a lot of follow-up, both state and federal regulation reinforcing that, whether it be from the OCC, the FDIC, other acts like Sarbanes-Oxley that came out, but they're all referencing a message that I think was reinforced in a very strong fashion by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in 2012. And that message is that lenders are 100% liable for the actions of third-party providers. Okay? And as title agents, we are third-party providers to the lenders and therefore are being held to that same standard. Okay? So moving on, what I want to do is just briefly talk about NPI. When we talk about sending secure information or sending information securely, we're referring to NPI that needs to be sent securely. The Federal Trade Commission gives us a great definition here. It's any information that an individual gives you to obtain a financial product or service, okay, at a high level. Now, I'm going to take just a second. If you look at the bottom of the screen here, and as Jeremy mentioned, we have provided these slides to you, there's a link. And this is just a document, a publication by the FTC that outlines some tips and tricks and information as to how to comply with the privacy of consumer financial information. It's a great document. I would highly recommend you taking some time to look that over. All right. But if we move to the next slide, we'll actually give you some examples of what NPI is today. Okay. Things that we see on a regular basis: account numbers, loan payoff information, credit card statements, more common social security numbers, dates of birth, so and so on. What I want to do is actually take a second here. If we look at the HUD-1 settlement statement, this is an interesting conversation I've had, and I won't ask for a poll here, and obviously we can't see a raise of hands, but if I was, I would venture to say that the vast majority of participants today have sent a HUD-1 or settlement statement through standard email communication channels today. Right? We are approaching a time where that will no longer be acceptable. Right? And today we're going to give you the tools so that we take some of the excuses off the table that products were too clunky or too expensive, or I couldn't find a easy, streamlined way to do this, right? That's the goal of today's presentation. Okay? So let's jump into the next slide here and actually talk about what is email encryption at a very high level, right? Simply put, email encryption, it's a process by which emails are secured to prevent unauthorized access to that message. Okay? There's multiple methods by which this can be done. A good analogy here is to picture standard email as you creating a letter, putting it in an envelope, and sending that through the postal system. Right? If somebody intercepts that, they can easily open up that message and read it because it's in plain text. Right? Now, a secure or encrypted email actually would take that message, that letter, and encrypt it, cipher it, using a complex series of algorithms so that any unintended recipients wouldn't be able just to read that. Okay. The other secure portion of that is to think of email encryption as actually, an armored truck or safe delivering that message, right, to the intended recipient, right. So that from a 50,000-foot view, that's what email encryption is. And the next slide will actually talk about the whys of email encryption. Why is it important? And I think hopefully most of us, and I would venture to say that most of us would agree that it is important to use or to implement a secure email platform. Why? Well, standard email can be intercepted, as we talked about. It's not secure, and it's not compliant. Another bullet point I think that is worth mentioning here is that we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we handle that information in a safe and secure fashion. Right? Consumers have entrusted us with this very private, sensitive information, and expect that that won't end up in the wrong hands. And for those of you who may have dealt with identity theft or fraud or some sort of information ending up in the wrong hands, you know that it can be a nightmare to correct that and make that right. It's very time-consuming. It's very costly. Right? So you have to ask yourself the question: are you willing to take the risk, right, to send that through standard email? And the risk of fines, the risk of punitive damages potentially, and also reputational risk. Right? The last thing we want is to have, our names plastered in the news because we mishandled or did not properly safeguard NPI. So that gives us some of the whys. Now, enough of the whys and the what. Let's go ahead and transition to Greg, and he's going to go ahead and walk us through some of the hows of secure and encrypted email.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you, Jeremy, for the opportunity to present on today's webinar. So, as title agents and related third-party vendors needing to embrace technology, it can be a really daunting process. There's so much information out there, and of course, in the technology world, we love acronyms, right? So if we're looking on the screen right now, we can see there's IBE, there's PGP, there's TLS, opportunistic TLS, and SMIME, and there's many more. And you know, the poor lady on the screen looks a little confused as it is, so I only wanted to put a few of the common ones on this particular slide, but there's many more. And the point of that is each one of these is important. Each one has a pro, and each one has a con. Each one has a factor of convenience. Each one has a factor of security. So if you're looking to evaluate an option, which clearly you should be, right? We see in the news every day Scott has said Target was breached, Neiman Marcus was breached, the government organizations are breached, and they all have a lot more money than we do, right? So if they're doing things we assume the right way with a good budget and they're being compromised, then we really need to take this seriously. So how do you go about doing this is what I'd like to talk about over the next couple of slides. So you can see the acronyms on the screen. PGP is fairly common, and that stands for Pretty Good Privacy, which is kind of funny if you think about it. I think we all want something a little bit better than something that's pretty good, about excellent privacy, right, or uncrackable privacy, or something a little bit better. But nonetheless, that is an acronym that was named by the creator of the technology many years ago, and it is certainly a standard. And I think that that's really an important thing that we just talk about real briefly. When it comes to computers and systems and technology, we build things on standards, sometimes referred to as protocols, which is a very common way of doing things. There's different types of computers, different types of operating systems, use case scenarios. So these standards were developed so that everyone, regardless of the system that you're on, can work seamlessly together. So PGP is one of those particular standards. There's TLS, which stands for Transport Layer Security. There's SMIME, which is a secure multi-purpose internet mail extension, and so on and so forth. And I certainly don't want to bore people by overcomplicating things with all of these fancy acronyms, because they're not something that you really need to master in order to make a good decision. And today what we want to do is give you some tips, tricks, and information so that you can make a good choice for your title company. Everyone's different. Everyone has different needs. So the important thing is to take what you learned today, and I would encourage everyone to do their own research, call multiple providers, ask some of the questions that we're going to talk about in the next slide, just to see if what you're buying works for you. You want to make sure that you don't have buyer's remorse. So that being said, let's transition to the next slide and talk about what you should be looking for, right? So everything is different. The PGP is different. The TLS is different. The secure MIME is different. So what should you be looking for? Well, nobody likes change. Nobody, especially your customers. So when possible, I would recommend choosing a solution that involves the least amount of change. Now that being said, that doesn't mean that the solution that has the least amount of change is the least secure or the worst solution. And I don't want that to be a misnomer, that if you go with a solution that's really easy and it's the least amount of change, that somehow you're sacrificing quality or security. It's just like anything else that you buy. There's products and services that require you to change a lot of things, and there's products and services that are just a lot easier to embrace. So I think a really powerful takeaway is you need to be respectful of two groups of people that are going to be in some way, shape, or form using the email encryption technology that you ultimately decide to purchase. And the first group is your customers and vendors. And as title agents, we're going to be sending a lot of emails. We're going to be writing our lenders, banks, we're going to be requesting payoff information, loan officers, realtors, attorneys, and many people that you're going to be repetitively working with throughout your career and the life of your business, as well as your end customers. The other thing that you're going to want to be considerate of is your customers, and that's how they're going to open your messages. And it's 65% of email messages today are opened on mobile devices. Think about that for a second. It's a pretty high number. We're probably watching this webinar, most of us, on a computer or a laptop or what have you. But if you think about it, when you're emailing your customers, and in many cases, maybe even the bank or whoever, all of those people are going to have iPhones, tablets, Android devices, smart devices, and 65% of them are going to retrieve in one way, shape, or form one of your messages on that mobile device. So when you as a title agent make a choice on how you're going to encrypt your email, it's impacting your customers, it's impacting your vendors, and it's impacting your employees. And we're going to talk next about how it could impact and what you can do and what you should be looking for when you choose the solution that ultimately you're going to have to live with and your customers are going to have to live with. So let's talk about your employees for a second. You want to make sure that they don't have to fight the change. Again, nobody likes change. Customers are important, so are your employees. That's the lifeblood of your company. They help you move the company forward. They get the work done. So what we recommend is using an auto encryption technology. And an auto encryption technology means that when you choose your service provider that's going to offer you the email encryption service, one of the questions you're going to want to ask is the onus on my people to decide what gets encrypted, or can we build some intelligence into the process? And I believe it's very, very, very important that when you choose a provider, you ask that question. You want to make sure that you can sit down consultatively with the provider and say, this is the type of information that we encrypt. By the way, we're a title company. So if you were to enroll with an encryption provider, they may need to know that when you see the word HUD, that's encryptable and it doesn't stand for something else. There's going to be a lot of things that your encryption provider is going to need to understand that as an agent, that word or that language or that number constitutes something very special to you and your customer. That's the non-public information. And that brings us down to the final checkpoint here. Remove that decision from your staff. Now think about this for a second. Some solutions that encrypt email will give you a button or a third-party add-in or a different system altogether to send encrypted messages. So you have your normal email and you have your encrypted email, and that person on your staff could ultimately be responsible for whether or not your company is encrypting non-public personal information or whether they're not. And that's not to say that people are going to make bad choices, but what it is to say, one, is human beings are human beings. If I'm sitting down and I'm working and when it gets busy, we all know how hard we work in the title industry. If one of your employees forgets to hit the magic encrypt button, what happens if that is the email that causes the data breach? And you had an encryption solution the entire time, but you placed the onus on that employee to decide on behalf of your business that you're responsible for whether or not an email gets encrypted. So from an employee perspective, it's very important to make it easy on your people. Try not to choose a product that's going to change how they work daily. You want to send an email, you hit the send button, whether it's from your mobile device or your tablet or webmail or Outlook or what you use. Remove that decision making. You don't want to be audited and found guilty of an NPI breach simply because someone forgot to hit a button. So a quick summary of this slide, and I think it's important that we just go through the bullet points one more time because these are the questions that you're going to want to ask when evaluating who you're going to buy these services from. customers and vendors, you want to make sure that the email just shows up. You want to choose a technology that delivers the email as seamlessly as possible, and that's TLS, and that's opportunistic TLS. So if anyone's taking notes, I would encourage you to get that pencil out and just write that down, TLS, opportunistic TLS, and that's a really great question that you're going to want to ask when evaluating your provider. That TLS technology is going to allow you to hit a button, send your mail, and it will just show up in that lender's mailbox or that loan officer's mailbox. And that's important because we've seen scenarios where lenders say, well, this title company started encrypting their emails, and we're not allowed to open them because they contain a link. They want us to log into a portal. They want us to create an account. They want us to do this different process. And the lender's position is, we've been doing business with you for the last 10 years this way. We don't want to have to deal with the consequence of your poor decision in purchasing a not-so-robust solution. So you want to make sure that your lenders can open the email. One, it's convenient for them. It just shows up. Two, many lenders have policies that if you choose the wrong email encryption system, they're not allowed to open your email because they're not allowed to click links because they might not be secure. So make sure that you're choosing a TLS solution or an opportunistic TLS solution that your lenders and vendors, it just shows up. Make it easy on your customers. You owe it to them. Be considerate of your mobile users. 65% of us answer our emails on our phone. So you want to choose a technology, again, like TLS that will deliver it. And then, of course, your employees. Make it easy on them. Choose something with an auto-encrypt feature and remove that decision as to whether or not to encrypt from the employee. So that way, you're safer. Let's take a look at the next slide. Some advice that I would like to give everyone today is you want to plan for a successful project. Do not treat this as if you're going out and buying another computer for your company. Don't treat this as if you're going out and buying a printer or an office supply product. What you're buying is a very, very serious security tool. You need to do your homework. You need to ask the right questions, and that's one of the reasons we're having this webinar, is to arm you as a consumer with the information you need to make an educated choice. So how do you plan for a successful project? Well, the first thing is you can ask your underwriter. Underwriters are in the business. They want to make sure that you're their agents and that you are doing things correctly. They have some shared liability. They have a very vested interest in the success of this industry. Underwriters sometimes will have negotiated relations with email encryption providers that you can get a discount from. So that's good. I would definitely encourage everyone to ask their underwriter. Now that doesn't mean that you should automatically just buy what your underwriter recommends. Because if you recall, there's many, many different ways that we can encrypt email. And if the provider your underwriter is recommending doesn't support mobile integration, or if they don't support TLS, or if the product your underwriter is recommending is making your employees do something different, you really want to be careful, not just to blindly follow advice. This is your company. This is your responsibility, and you want to shop for this very seriously and make sure that you make the right decision. You owe it to your staff, and you owe it to your vendors. Nonetheless, though, you should always check for underwriter discounts and relationships. Second thing I would recommend is ask your software provider. Again, you don't want to go out and buy something, feel really good about it, and then find out that after you wrote this check that it's not going to work with your settlement services software. Now, this is not usually the case, but it's important. You always want to perform your due diligence. You always want to check. We've seen this happen. Title agents have gone out. They've done a little bit of research. They've signed contracts, 1-, 2-, 3-year contracts, only to find out what they bought won't work. Don't make that mistake. Talk to your software vendor. Okay, the third thing I would recommend is talk to your IT vendor. Not all of us have IT vendors. Smaller companies may have someone in the office that manages IT. Medium-sized companies may have an IT consultant or an outside firm. Larger companies probably have IT staff. Involve these people. The decisions that you make when purchasing software and encryption are going to impact these people's lives and their ability to make sure it works. So to summarize the 3 points again, plan for a successful project. Talk to your underwriter. Talk to your peers. If you're a member of a state land title association or ALTA, engage those resources. Do your homework. Talk to your software vendor and talk to your IT provider and the people that your decision may impact. Let's transition to the next slide. So who are some of these providers that offer these services? Well, there's many of them out there, and they're all quite different, and they're all quite the same. They all do one thing. They encrypt email. Many of them do it the same way. Many of them do it differently. There's pros, there's cons, and a lot of what we talked about. The ability to deliver a message directly to a lender's mailbox without asking them to log into a secure portal. It's a question that you're going to want to ask these people. How does it work with mobile devices? What about contracts? Can you get a phone call with these vendors and your IT people and your software vendors? Get everyone on the same page. That's part of planning for the successful project. Make sure that all of the moving parts are talking together and coordinating together for a successful implementation. And these are some of the companies that we feel offer good products and that we would encourage you to call and ask some smart questions to. I think that will conclude it.
All right. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Scott. Great insight on what people in today's call should be looking for when picking a solution for email encryption. As a reminder, if there are any questions, please use the chat box function. We are going to tackle some of the questions that came in during the course of today's presentation. Real quick, just as a reminder, if you missed any part of today's presentation, it is being recorded and will be available for replay early next week at on ALTA's website at alta.org/title topics. All right, Scott and Greg, I'm going to pitch you guys some questions here. And just as a reminder, neither are an attorney, so we can't provide any legal advice. I saw one who asked about whether or not you could pass the cost of the email encryption on to the consumer. That may be dependent on state laws. So I would check counsel there, talk with your underwriters to see how you can handle this. Michael asked if you can encrypt emails, if there's options that you can encrypt emails without requiring the recipient to enter a password. Are there options that allow for this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the TLS security. So TLS and opportunistic TLS are the two biggies. And that's a very good question because it brings us right back to the point. If you're doing business with your customers and your vendors, and all of a sudden they receive these emails, they're going to be confused. What is this? Why do I need to log in? Why do I need to do this? And they may think it's a phishing scam or it's malware, and then they're going to call you. So, yes, there are technologies that can do this very seamlessly with a transparent process for the person sending and a transparent process for the person receiving. And I would encourage people to look at the TLS. There's different shared directories as well. If the encryption provider that you choose is a part of a shared directory of keys, and your recipient is also part of that, that will also facilitate a very smooth transition where you just send the email, it encrypts, and then that person receives it without having to choose a password.
All right. Now, I had some questions about TLS, and this is from Steven. Kind of goes with this. He asks if you have a TLS system, does the receiver also have to have this enabled as well to be able to communicate?
They do. They do. Now, here's the good news about that, is most properly configured mail systems will support inbound TLS. And here's a perfect example of that. Believe it or not, Google. If you have Google for Business or if you have a Gmail, the Google systems support TLS. So if I was to use an opportunistic TLS-based encryption product and send to customer or lender at gmail.com or their Gmail hosted domain, it would just show up like magic. A lot of the larger email hosts will also support this. I believe Rackspace supports it, Outlook.com, Office 365. So if you choose an opportunistic TLS or a TLS solution, more than likely, and I know that's not a very scientific answer, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth, so let's say it as it is, right? More than likely that recipient will just be able to read it. They're not going to need a login or anything else. So what happens if they don't have it, right? So if they don't have it, typically what happens is the system will say, oh, well, hey, they don't have it. What's the next best option? That's when you get that secure portal. So if anyone on this webinar has received a message from Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Capital One, and it's like, hey, you've got a secure message. Click here and log in. That's what you would get to. So there's different ways where the software you choose, and again, it depends on the software you choose. Not everyone will do this, where it'll first choose the best delivery method. And if it's like, oh, the receiver doesn't support TLS, it'll revert down to a less convenient delivery method, but nonetheless a secure delivery method.
Okay. And so maybe just to recap, because a couple more questions have popped in about using Google Apps. So Google Apps working with the TLS is protecting the NPI, correct?
It is. And
okay.
Just like I'm not a lawyer, and we didn't want to get into that conversation about paying for things and whether or not it's passed through on the HUD, certain people will have certain views on Google Apps. I don't think that Google Apps is a bad solution, but then you go online and you read that the NSA is trying to get into Google and the NSA is doing this, and Google makes a lot of money on ad revenue, and in some situations Google will actually mine the contents of your email for advertising purposes. So I don't want to come down on the side that I would approve of Google Apps or I would disapprove of it. I would encourage folks that have Google Apps or are considering acquiring it to do their own research and arrive at their own conclusion. There's plenty of people that use it and it works great. There's plenty of people that use it with concerns.
All right. Another common theme coming in and kind of expected was cost. I don't know if either of you want to touch on a little bit of what this is going to entail, title companies out there.
Yeah, Greg, I could take that real quick and then have you follow up. I think it's interesting, and Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind going back to the previous slide there that shows some of those vendors as we talk about this, what you're going to see today in terms of cost is varied, and that will be reflected in the service provided, right? I think there are a lot of products that have come out and who have offered kind of a transaction-based cost. But the thing that I've noticed, and it's actually a very good thing for the consumer here, is because of the increased regulation that we're starting to see, we're seeing a little more competition. And as competition, you get better products, and also kind of an ancillary benefit of that is you get a decreased price. And again, I think if you look back a couple of years, the price, a lot of the companies that I would talk to said, hey, look, this is just doesn't make sense financially for us, and we're just going to risk the slap on the wrist if we get caught. And it was in big part because, well, one, it was too clunky, and two, the cost was just, it didn't make financial sense. You'll find now that there are some very, very affordable options here, whether that be a per transaction cost or a per user cost. It's very affordable.
Yeah, I would ask to add to that. I would say that when choosing a provider, be careful with signing long-term contracts because technology changes. And as we discussed earlier, you're going to want to make sure this works with your software vendor and your IT vendor and your organization, and those needs can change too. So I would caution everyone not to sign long-term contracts and to definitely shop it. I've seen pricing as low is $5, let's say, per mailbox with some very low setup charges. And I've seen pricing where a 10-person title company wrote a check for $20,000 with a 3-year contract. It's a pretty big difference in price, you know, $25,000 over 2 or 3 years versus a couple dollars a month. And sometimes the old adage is true, you get what you pay for. Sometimes, quite frankly, people are getting ripped off. So definitely want to do your homework on that. I would expect a quality product to not require a long-term contract, and I would expect the quality product to be in the $3 to $8 to $9 a month per user range, really depending on the features. The low end of the spectrum, not so many features. The high end of the spectrum, many features.
All right, thanks for that recap on the cost. Definitely one of the questions among a lot of the participants today. We still have a lot coming in. We've already kind of blown past our half-hour time allotment. Feel free to please reach out to either the speakers, Scott and Greg. Correct? You'll be more than happy to field questions after today's presentation. One final quick question. A few people asked, you know, what's the time frame for this? When do I have to start sending HUDs through encrypted emails? And I don't think there's really a clock, you know, that says, you know, you got to do it this date. As Scott, you mentioned, you know, protecting NPI really started with the GLB back in 1999, and this has kind of really evolved with, you know, lenders now being held liable for their third parties. Would you guys like to maybe comment a little bit on any timelines?
Yeah, I would say now is the time, right? You're not going to get, and perhaps you will, and different requirements may be different depending on the lenders that you're working with. But again, you have to ask yourself the question, you know, are you willing to take the risk? And I think up to this point, a lot of people have, and have said, you know, yeah, I'm going to continue to do it this way. And I think, like I said, that's short-lived, and this may be. I think there will become a point that if you're not using secure email, you may no longer, lenders will no longer do business with you, right? Or you may kind of work yourself out of that. And so my recommendation would be to start this right away. Now, again, I don't know if you're ever going to get somebody coming down saying, yep, this is the specific date, but sooner than later.
Right. Greg, anything else to add to kind of wrap up?
Yeah, I would agree with Scott. One could make the case that going back 10 years ago under Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which says you're responsible for protecting financial information, one could make the case that you should have been doing it then. But that's just making a case, right? What we're seeing is a lot of title agents are beginning to get lender questionnaires, and the lenders are asking, hey, what is it that you're doing? And this really covers the broad spectrum of ALTA best practices, pillar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on. So as lenders start asking more, they're going to require title agents to answer truthfully what they're doing and what they're not doing. Now, what the consequence could be from that lender, I don't want to speculate, but as Scott said, it very well could be the case shortly that if you're not meeting many of the ALTA best practices, the lender's going to say, wait a minute, CFPB says I'm responsible for third-party vendors. Do I really want to be responsible for ABC title company, third-party vendor, or XYZ? Because XYZ, boy, they're doing a lot of things right. ABC seems a little behind. Where do I want to place my liability? So I think it's a smart business decision to really start taking a look at this now. Be ahead of the curve, embrace the best practices, and compete on the best practices. When you can go to your lenders and your realtors and put on your website, we're embracing best practices, we care about consumer information, and we care about our lender expectations, that's going to help you grow your business.
All right. Thank you, Greg. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded. It'll be on ALTA's website, alta.org/title topics. Looking ahead, our next webinar will be on April 16th, and we'll shift from the best practices discussion for a month and we'll talk about enhancing customer service. With purchase orders starting to dominate the market, title companies are going to need to brush up on their service skills, so please be on the lookout for registration information for this webinar. Also, if you have any webinar topics that you think we should consider, please shoot me an email. Again, my email is jyohe@alta.org. And with that will bring us to the conclusion of today's presentation. Scott and Greg, thanks again for joining us, and I hope all the listeners found today's presentation useful. Take care, everyone.